Low-C Super Rock Rey. So, as many other people have already had issues with, it appears I have stripped the servo out in this bad boy. It'll turn left, will not turn right, make just crunchy noises. So, as many people have done, buy the 5th scale servo mount that Low-C offers, and also buy a 5th scale servo to upgrade the whole thing and be done with it. Now, many people will suggest very expensive, high-tech Savoc servos. I'm going to just give this thing a shot. So I believe this was somewhere $45-ish, something like that on Amazon. Claims to be waterproof, claims to be up to 60 kg if you put enough voltage to it. We will see. I have no idea. Is this good? Is it bad? It's probably junk, but we're going to give it a shot and see what happens, see if it lasts us very long at all. While we're at it, we have the GPM steering servo kit, the Servo Saver kit, and so we're going to put that in since we have it all torn apart. Now, step one, obviously we've already got the body off, so that one's easy. You can see how to do that in many different places online. If you look on the Low-C forum, there's a guy by the name of David who's actually shown you how to take all the screws out to take the whole cage off as one piece. Very cool. I'm not going to try it that way. I'm going to try to do something different. That's already been done. He's already done that, so you can go out there and you can see there's screws at the front. You end up taking, there's like a cross brace out, screws at the bottom, some of these screws back here, and you can take the whole cage off as one piece. You have to unplug the lights, things like that. What I think I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to probably take off a tire, take off this mud guard on the side, take off the center piece of the cage only, see how that folds up, and take the interior out. Does that give me enough room to actually get to the servo, the pieces that I want? I don't know, but we're going to give it a shot. To get this side panel out, it looks like simply 2 screws. 1, 2, and the whole panel will come out. There's the side panel. Alright, now the first part of this is pretty easy, right? 1 screw on each side. It looks like it's going to be able to pivot by these back screws. Maybe I have to loosen them a little bit, but this whole thing should come up. The front of this is actually attached right here. Now, I could probably pry that up, stick my tool, stick the wrench in underneath it, get those loose. But knowing that I want to take this interior loose anyway, and it looks like 1, 2 screws on each side for the interior, I'm going to go ahead and try to loosen up those. That way I'm not prying on this too much. It is just a Lexan, it'll eventually break. Alright, with that final screw out, look, there you go. That comes up. I still don't know if there's another hidden screw holding this whole thing in. Doesn't look like it. Looks like it just wants to fight me a little bit. Yay, body out. Maybe I should give that a good cleaning while I'm at it, huh? So this is good now, check it out. You can basically see everything it appears that we're going to need to see in order to get the servo out. So you can see the top 2 servo screws on each side, and looks like we'll be able to have access to those. You can also trace the servo wire. It actually goes underneath the speed control before it goes into the receiver. Now, if you guys will watch one of my previous videos, you'll see I put my receiver in a Traxxas Rustler Stampede waterproof box. So that's going to add a couple more steps for me, but otherwise pretty good. Now, we know we're going to replace this linkage, the servo mount also. So I'm actually looking, and it appears that it's actually just 1, 2 screws, maybe 3, and that whole center linkage may come out. So You may take the whole thing out as a piece instead of taking the servo first. But we need to, before we get that loose, we need to go ahead and unplug the receiver from, the servo from the receiver. Alright, my wire's pulled out of the receiver box, threaded out from underneath the the ESC. However, just so you know, it is zip tied in here with these other wires. We will need to cut the zip tie, and then after we're done with all this later, make sure that we put that zip tie back. We're now time to actually remove the servo and the linkage. I'm going to do it all as one big chunk, which means taking this wire and both of these, this wire, sorry, it's been a long day, these 3 screws out. Now just notice that these 2 screws here also have mating ones up on the top center support that we're going to have to take out. Bottom 3 screws out. Now it still won't budge. Still won't budge, right? Because there's these 2 screws here in the top. Five screws out. Now, is it possible to get the servo out? So I'm going to take these 4 servo screws out, take the servo physically off, and then see what happens. Okay, servo comes loose. Did I miss a screw? Oh man, look at that, guys. So, geez, that'd be why I couldn't get that. That'd be why I couldn't get the servo mount out. Look, the servo mount, the center screw, is the same one as the motor plate. I bet if we remove that, it comes out a whole lot easier. What do you think? Oh, look at that, it actually moves now. Funny how that works. Okay, now in order to get the servo the rest of the way out, turn steering all the way right, it will allow you access to the screw, and that should be the last thing. That'll be the last thing that'll free the servo. Servo is out. Ta-da! Now let's see about this servo mount. So it is wedged. If you notice, it goes around the drive shaft, and it actually is underneath this. So I believe, since the factory one's plastic, I could probably twist it and get it to push out. But the aftermarket aluminum one, I'm probably not going to be able to do that with. So I wonder if I actually need to loosen up these 2 screws and maybe these 2 front mounting ones in order to get enough room for that to come loose. Okay, this is interesting. So 1, 2, 3 screws out of here, 2 screws that hold the rear of the shock tower in, 2 screws that hold the front of the shock tower in, 2 screws that help to hold the center of the I don't know, what do I want to call that? It's the upper control arm bulkhead, basically. So once all of those are loose, then your center shaft here can wiggle just enough, and that will then let you get, in theory, will let you get the servo mount out. Now I'm going to be replacing some of the servo saver bell crank items anyway also, so I need to get all those out. But with those up and over, I believe, oh, it's so close. Haha! Old servo mount is out. New servo mount can go back in. So if you are not replacing the servo saver and related items with the GPM, you would then start reassembly now with your new servo mount and your new servo. If you're gonna, so we can fast forward to that part if you need. Otherwise, keep following along as we figure out how to get the rest of this stuff. if you want to see what comes in this GPM Racing Kit, open it up. Looks like a horn, linkage, some hardware, tie with some mounts, and another linkage. So those are the 5 things that come in it. So that's what we're going to be looking to take off to get these on. As we take this off, I'm just going to note where my servo saver is currently adjusted to. You see the nut is basically all the way down, 2 washers in there, and it looks like it's compressed that spring pretty hard. So this servo saver should be set to pretty firm as it comes out of the factory. I've continued to take things apart. So now the 4 front screws that hold this whole gearbox and case on, in order to get this to slide forward, since the servo saver assembly goes on both sides of the center drive shaft, you will see that this center plate actually keys in over the top of the center differential. So as I pull this forward, pull this plate up, alright, drive shaft will fall out. That's okay, we can fix that later. But then, if I am correct, all of this will actually slide off the front. One last thing to get it to do that is we actually need to detach this from the front of the roll cage, which means 1 screw on either side here of the front bumper needs to come loose. Alright, everything is now here. I've pulled this top piece that holds both of these on, pulled that off, comes off with a pin and a bearing. You see a bearing in on the other side that sits in on. To keep it straight, I've gone ahead and grabbed the GPM piece so that I can stick that in there like that. And it looks like its little bushing is going to need to go in through the top as it sets. The replacement on this side, you can see the bottom piece here. Again, the bushing is probably going to go right in like that. And then this will be on the other side here. Looks the same. Awesome. So we need to go ahead and take this spring, this whole part apart so that we can just reassemble it on the GPM side here. So you have the nut, 2 washers, and then the spring. Factory piece slides off, and when you compare that versus the GPM, see it's the same length. GPM has threaded in here, whereas this had a captured nut, so that's interesting. And then that is the rod that goes in through the bottom, so it's the new one. The new GPM part, spring, 2 washers, and then the nut. There's been some people that have talked about not putting both washers back in and or not cranking it down as far in order to leave a little more wiggle with the servo saver. Maybe help protect the new servo. I might do the same. I might leave this just a little bit looser than what it was before. To both of these screws so that this can come off. And then I also need to get to these 4. Factory assembly, the start of my GPM replacement. Right here. Now if I look at this and I try to line these up, it looks like it wants to go together like this. We need to get this metal plate off and bolt it on. One word of warning at this step, as you go to mount this on, the GPM hardware is actually slightly shorter than the factory hardware. The holes are not tapped deep enough. So you cannot reuse the factory hardware. You have to use the new GPM hardware. Okay, there is the new GPM linkage all assembled. Now, of course, these 4 points as we put them together all require Loctite. With the factory setup, those were captured nylon lock nuts, but now we are going screw into aluminum, so all of those points got Loctite. You want to make sure that your brass pivots are in between here, so so even after it tightens down, it will pivot nicely. GPM assembly officially attached inside the truck now. Alright, we got those front two, so now we get to hold our mouth just right and see if we can't slide this whole bulkhead back in underneath here and connect the drive shaft, slide these all into the appropriate spots all at the same time. Awesome. Okay, so I have everything sitting roughly right. I say roughly because of course nothing's still bolted back on, but you can see the servo saver is back in its home and the steering appears to work. So of course, before I get too zesty about screwing things back on, it's time to get the new bracket in there. Okay, so this took a while, but we are officially, this whole front clip is now back together. It is in there. So we are, if you fast forward to jumped from not needing this, just wanting to replace this, then you will see that we have bolted this center mount back in. It goes just in like the factory one did, no questions asked. What we need to do now is take a look at, this is the factory servo. This is going to be the one that we're going to put on. Now, interesting, again, I know nothing about this servo, I just purchased it online. Interesting to see how short it is, but we need to get the servo arm and this linkage onto the new servo. Another item of note as we go through this, so look at the length of the two servo leads. So, the factory one is a little bit longer than the new one. Turns out that's a problem, because even with the factory one, since I had put in a receiver box, it was barely long enough as it is. Fortunately, I have a little extension lead that will give me a little bit extra distance, plus it'll allow me to go ahead and tighten up the receiver box, and I can always make this connection out here at a later time. We've ran into a pretty big uh-oh here. Check out the gears on both the new servo versus the old servo. That's not the same tooth count or tooth design, is it? And when you look at it here, and you see that versus that, those are different. So the unfortunate thing for me is beautiful aluminum servo horn that came. All right, folks. So it's actually been like 3 or 4 days since we just jumped ahead in time. The problem, as it turns out, if you look at the new servo, it has an 18 tooth, very square head on it, whereas this has, I don't even know what kind of tooth that is, head on it from the factory. So obviously this servo saver, this servo horn, doesn't go on there. 18 tooth servo horn, except for it comes with one. This servo does come with this plastic one, but as we all know, plastic servo horns are just a waste of time, especially on a vehicle this big. So I scoured the internet and I finally came up with this servo horn from DJI Racing. Alright, there are folks out of northeastern US. They make a whole bunch of products for 5th scale vehicles, including a 18 tooth 5th scale servo horn. Now obviously this thing is gonna be longer than the factory one, but that's actually, I think, a very good thing. One of the things I tested was the total angle that this servo turns versus this servo, and as it turns out, this servo, I don't believe, turns the same total angle that the factory one does. And so the fact that this is longer is actually going to be a good thing. We're going to be able to select one of these outer two hulls and to get the total throw that we still need for full steering. So that is a good thing. So that's the step we're on. We're about to put on this new servo horn, move over the linkage to it, hopefully the screw works, and then start to get that servo in there since everything else is in. Alright, so the frustrations continue with this. So one of the things that you need to do before you put a servo horn on always is you need to turn the vehicle on and you need to reset the steering trim to neutral on your controller. Now we know from the old servo that the steering arm from the factory position needs to be straight down. So we're going to take this servo arm and we're going to try to slide it on here straight down. But of course the teeth aren't quite right. So you can see just slightly off. Well, hey, let's just move it over a tooth, right? So pick it up, try to move it just gently one tooth, and where is the next tooth? Way over there! Now guess what? This is the thing that really is bad about it. If I take my steering trim and I try to center that, that's all the steering trim I have. It's not quite. Alright, so what's happening here? I had to double check myself. I literally had to come back and rationalize and say, yes, that is the side that the servo horn is supposed to be on. Because what happens here that is confusing me is look where the tires are. Look at where the hubs are. We're full right. You can actually see that we're touching here. We're full right, and the servo's not even quite, it's straight. So I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Servo's straight, these should be straight. Well, what's happened is because it must be that the center of the servo horn here has moved over because of how much bigger it is. Plus, I don't know if it's actually centered proportionally with this one. So the center of the servo is actually moved over, which moves this whole linkage over. Plus, as I screw this in a more outermost hole, it puts this at a bigger angle, which pulls that over also. So in order for this to actually be centered, I need to put that servo horn over at a different angle to start with. So we're gonna, unfortunately it's not all really screwed in yet. I should be able to, I believe, get to it just right like this without taking anything more off. Move the servo horn over continually until I get it to where tires can be straight with the servo horn wherever it needs to be. Look at us, just a couple minutes later, you can now see this combination. This, along with the servo trim set all the way right, is what gets you the wheels pretty much straight. And look at this, we have steering! Yay! And you can see I actually have right there, you can see it goes almost to where it hits. Right there, I bet with the impact it would on the other side. We actually get right to where it touches. So I am getting all the steering that the knuckles and spindles will allow. So that is good. I didn't give up any steering radius, which I was a little bit worried about. So we're in business. So what do I need to do? I need to put this arm back in, which I thought might hit because you can see where it goes. So I'm going to have to check that out as I put it in and then double check to see if it hits or not. I need to put my receiver box back in. We're almost there. So servo is in, servo linkage is on, receiver box is closed, wires are cleaned back up. This support does fit, the linkage does clear it, but look what I had to do here. So because I put this super long linkage on this servo, it hits. So as I turn, as the servo swings this direction, it actually comes even actually just ever so slightly outside of the chassis here. So I had to take a chunk out of it. Boo, right? But at that point, steering now works. So what have we got to do? We got to put the people back in. We need to put the cage back together. We need to put the body on, and then I believe we are done. All right, Super Rock Rey back together. A couple things that I'm going to need to do. So we're going to leave it here for this video and be done. But a couple things I want to do. I want to, per the instruction manual, yes, these things do come with instruction manuals. Yes, you should read them. I want to make sure that I'm setting the travel on. You can recalibrate the steering on the controller. I want to check that. Also, if you go through a bind process, you can set your endpoints. The other thing, this servo will run on 8.4 volts, and the speed control will produce 8.4 volts. So I think I'm going to try to drive it like this first, just see what my general feelings are, and then I might come back and bump that up to the 8.4 volts and see what that looks like. Alright folks, thank you.